let's dive into Bitcoin moment of the year. And here I went with, and by the way, we don't know each other's answers, so we're hearing them for the first time here and having discussion about them. Um, so for me, this was like an individual moment for people who are following Bitcoin and watching Bitcoin. So it was like, it wasn't a mass moment. It's a moment that was experienced, I think, by each individual for the most part. And that's the realization that Bitcoin could have the ETFs, the political tailwinds, the institutional interest, and still go nowhere for a long time. So it was that moment where, like, okay, we're in this crab market. How long is it going to last? And sort of give up on that, you know, the cycle narrative and resign yourself to, like, okay, something different's going on here, and we're just going to have to kind of figure things out and remove our expectations based on history, and just understand that we're in this new era for Bitcoin, and correct and change the narrative, basically. So each of us, I think, came to that conclusion at different times in 2025. So that's the moment for me. For my 2026 prediction for Bitcoin moment of the year, is that this sideways regime changes rather suddenly and asymmetrically. And I think the move will feel kind of unjustified because it's not going to be a single catalyst, but it's because we've been effectively, earning this move that will happen suddenly, I think, in 2026, during this boredom of 2025. And I think that frustration that we've all been feeling, and that realization that we came to in a moment individually this year, will become the setup for a big and noisy move in this year. I'll pass it along to Brandon, and feel free to riff on anything I said, but I'd love to hear what your answer is to the Bitcoin moment of the year.
Yeah, for 2025, the moment of the year for me was watching Bitcoin become boring. And what do I mean by boring? It means it's entrenched in the traditional system. It's accepted by the political class. You don't see popular people coming out on Twitter just exposing their Bitcoin hate perspective anymore. I think the social cost is too high. And what does this actually mean? This means Bitcoin's winning. It means we're past this period where Bitcoin's weird and there's a high chance of Bitcoin failing. On the other side, personally, I find this very sad because I like the philosophical side of Bitcoin. I like the think boy stuff. And that content's all but gone. The content now is driven from TradFi or treasury companies or whatever flows here or there. And so we lost a good era. And I think the best Bitcoin Twitter era was probably 2018 to 2021 ish, maybe even 2020. And I think all that stuff's gone. We played our role. We inspired the other INTJs and INTPs in the world to buy this thing. And now hopefully we can ride off into the sunset. Related to that, the biggest headwind was the government's going to shut it down. Rightfully so. I think that was my biggest concern early on as well. And that turned into a tailwind this year with the Trump administration being very supportive. And so obviously a bunch of people who are sitting on the sidelines now have a little more confidence to jump in. And then one more data point, I'm sure you guys know this, the Bitcoin obituaries. There's a website tracking all the headlines in the news where they call Bitcoin's dead. And the chart looks like any 2017 altcoin. It pumps hard, and 2025 had 0 obituaries. And so there's a little quote unquote data to back that one up.
That's the obituary. Bitcoin obituaries. We're going to write the obituary for Bitcoin obituaries.
That's right. Hopefully that doesn't bite us in the butt in 2026. And then what I'm going to call for 2026, the moment of the year will just very similar to Brady's. I think Bitcoin's going to surprise people next year. I think a lot of people still think the 4-year cycle is real and we just ended it just now. But I'm going to go out and say Bitcoin will be the best performing major asset of 2026. Why? I mean, the reality is nothing stops this train, financial assets going up. And the flip side of that, it doesn't mean mainstream's going to benefit from this. I think mainstream is going to suffer more than they did in 2025. I expect more socialism at the state and city level. I expect more eat the rich campaigns, like California's 5% confiscation. I don't even want to call it a tax on the wealthy people. That's coming for everyone if we allow it. So yeah, it's going to get worse for the average, and also numbers going to go up a lot.
I've got a prediction for you, Brandon. There's going to be at least one more Think Boy piece in 2026.
Is it Bitcoin is Apache that I started before I had
It
my
should
son?
be. You should drop that too. But TikTok Next Block, the cadence of a new civilization, the essay version will be dropping soon. There was a talk in Amsterdam that I gave about it, but I've expanded upon it. It's hopefully wanted to have it ready for tomorrow for Genesis Day. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but there will be one forthcoming somewhat soon. I'm late to the game, but I'm going to drop a Think Boy piece of my own. So
let's go. Brady with the scoop. All right, John, what do you got?
So I'll give my answer, but I also want to propose this to you guys. And I was going to do it later, but I think the opening just came here. So like, what would you guys say were the previous bosses, like to use the video game analogy, like the bosses of different levels, right? The bosses that Bitcoin had to beat were things like, I'll just list the big ones, but maybe I'm missing some. Like first at the very beginning, people like, they don't even think the government's going to shut it down. They think it's like, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, right? Like they didn't even get to the part of what's the government going to do. But then once people say, okay, maybe it's not a Ponzi scheme. Okay, the government's going to shut it down. Okay, it uses too much energy. It's too volatile. Like all these different things, right? I think all of those bosses, I don't want to declare victory too early, like maybe not completely beaten. Some people will voice concerns on those topics, but like for the most part, we would view them as like pretty settled at this point. So then my question for you guys is like, what's that next boss that Bitcoin is going to have to overcome or fight? Quit him. Maybe, I don't know if your take, if I'm misinterpreting you, but that there is not another big boss. Like from here, it just kind of, things are more gradual and there's not like some big fight that needs to be won and discussed and debated. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think the next serious attack is going to be social, and it stems from economic inequality rising and it being unfair that the Bitcoiners made money even though they shouldn't, right? They don't deserve it. They got lucky. And I think it'll be easy for the left to spin that up as a Trump thing. And there's a lot of reason for them to do so. His family is grifting hard. And so, yeah, I think it's going to come around economic inequality. I don't know if anything will materialize, but I do expect that. I expect more wealth taxes, maybe unfair treatment to Bitcoin, probably not in the US under the current administration, but I think that's probably next. And then maybe long term, I think we'll still have to fight TradFi and where's the Bitcoin owned and can we transact privately. I think that'll come back around, but years out.
But they're not as like fundamental questions, right? The big fundamental ones are largely in the past. I'm kind of with you on that too.
The biggest boss was probably state level attack. And if the US is supportive, I think any future risks are less serious than that.
We have a good one in the chat, Quantum, which is definitely making a comeback in terms of FUD being issued around Bitcoin and discussed. So that's an interesting one. And, you should go and do the research on your own, but there's no cause for, near-term alarm is my assessment.
Yeah, but that's a good point. That could come to a head and that would be a big boss. And that does, theoretically threaten the survival of Bitcoin if you believe, the theory of what quantum could do. It's very far away. There's ways that Bitcoin can respond to it, all that good stuff. But that's a good point from the chat. I would put quantum in that bucket. I personally don't think it's going to be anytime too soon that it becomes like a existential crisis, but that's fair. Yeah. What's your take, Brady?
Coin joined Chris on Twitter has been kind of compiling some stuff about the quantum FUD, the recent quantum FUD. So it's a good handle to go check out, and he's linked out to some good research and thought about the quantum risk. So I'll just point people that direction. But yeah, I mean, bottom line is no near-term risk, and there are plans in place or being developed to fork to a quantum resistant cryptographic algorithm. So yeah, I don't think it's going to have to be anything rushed or emergency level, and we'll see. But
so I'll give my quick answer, and I'll just say what it is. I think the EO announcing or formalizing the Bitcoin strategic reserve, I know it was underwhelming in terms of some people's expectations. Some people wanted it to be, and we're buying 200,000 Bitcoin and here's the plan. Like, that didn't happen. So if those are your expectations, it was certainly underwhelming. But kind of related to what we're talking about here, just to get that announcement from the wealthiest country in the world, I think is a huge, huge deal. Even if they don't necessarily follow up on it this year or next year, I still think it's huge. And again, I don't think it really impacted the price in the short term in a year when we were flat or technically down, I think 5% on the year. But like looking at Bitcoin's long arc of history and the fact that government's going to shut it down was a boogeyman for so long, I'm going to put the EO and the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve as the biggest event of the year.
And what do you think for 2026?
So for 2026, I think hitting a new all-time high, and then that officially should end the 4-year cycle theory, bros. There might be a few holdouts. I'll predict this. Even if Bitcoin hits a new all-time high, like 3-4 months, 5-6 months from now, there will be someone out there on Twitter that says, oh no, this is the extended 4-year cycle. Like, you'll probably hear that, but I think 99% of people will say, okay, flat in 25, new all-time high in 26. This is not the 4-year cycle anymore. And I think that will be a huge thing for Bitcoin because we just won't have to debate it. People won't think that Bitcoin has to do this because it's a certain calendar year. So that would be a big development.